I started to use Unreal Engine roughly 6 years ago, or around then anyway. I had tried all kinds of other game creation software. Years ago there was RPG Maker, RPG Toolkit, and I messed around in those, making fun little projects. But when I discovered Unreal Engine, it was a real revelation. And I would just make all of these like test projects, all of these projects that I thought were going to become actual games. Well, eventually they'll just get abandoned. I'm sure lots of people have this kind of experience. But this video today is about one specific game. I think we all have that one dream project, story, idea that we want to kind of create. And then, for whatever reason, it doesn't happen or it gets kicked down the road. And I've been kicking this thing down a very long road. My shoes are probably worn out. So I've been working on this project on and off, probably for about 4 years. Don't get me wrong, there's not 4 years worth of development on it. There's nowhere near that, so I don't want to get your expectations up. What I've been doing is working on it in chunks, so I'll have kind of a burst of motivational period where I'll work on it for weeks, sometimes a month. It'll feel like if I just keep grinding away, eventually I'll have a game in a few years, decades. And then I hit a slump where it's like there's so much stuff, or there's something that's so hard I can't do it, and my brain will get fried and I'll be like, okay, I'll leave this project for another day. And then, whatever, weeks, months will pass. They say don't work on your dream game as your first game. And technically this isn't my first game. I've made other stuff. But I definitely see why people say that. Essentially learning how to use the engine while creating a game and learning how to create a game. And obviously because I'm not a professional game developer, there's barely any planning going on. Here's the story, here's the setting. What's the gameplay? No idea. What systems are there going to be? No idea. I think a lot of people who try to make their own game get to this kind of wall. And I've hit this wall many times on other projects. But for this one, I kept going for some reason, where I would usually just abandon it. Having worked on other projects, I learned things that I can then take back to this project. And it's like, oh yeah, I know how to do this now, I know how to do this now. And it's like, little by little, I'm chipping away at it. But yeah, this so-called dream project has become kind of a nightmare project at times. The file size has ballooned to over 200 gigabytes or something insane. Just leftover stuff from where I've not known what I've been doing and importing stuff. It's essentially a giant messy palette to my painting of a game. But I realised I haven't actually shown a lot of this project, so I just want to go through the kind of thought process of me creating it. So in this video I'll talk to you how it came about, the beginnings of it and how it morphed into what it is, and in the later videos I'll show you more of what I've actually done. It's kind of like a reverse devlog because I don't really record as I'm working on it. So to go through the kind of origin of this project, most of the things that I work on are science fiction in some way because that's my favourite genre, and my favourite subgenre of sci-fi is cyberpunk. I also love the Mass Effect game series, and I was always a fan of this idea of this gigantic artificial structure. So in Mass Effect there's the Citadel, and I really like this idea of having this almost inconceivably massive structure filled with people, a very kind of rainy noir scene, and I had a kind of loose rudimentary idea of what the story was going to be. You played as a detective, of course, and I made a whole series on this months ago. But long story short, eventually I realised that I didn't know what this game was going to be about. There was this ridiculous, overly complex story. Eventually I realised that it wasn't doable. However, I was also getting into 3D modelling at the time, kind of. and I was messing around with giant cityscapes. And round about this time, I had the thought of whether there had ever been a game, a TV show, a movie, a book, which had ever just portrayed the idea of a completely encased spherical world. Like a lot of the ring worlds that we see in science fiction, and the one we see in one of my favourite books, Rendezvous with Rama, which is this giant tube basically which has landmass all over it, and it's just gargantuan. So I started playing with this idea of what I would call an inverted sphere world. So it's like you live on the inside of a ball. And so my original project would eventually morph into this project, and I began thinking of what kind of world this would be. So there would be no natural sunlight, so there would have to be an artificial sun, and there could be different regions of the sphere, like a poorer area, a more industrial area, a more affluent area. And of course this would be inspired by Blade Runner as well. So it would be kind of cyberpunk and dystopian. And I did some sketches of concept art. Then I went ahead and created the first mesh just to kind of visualize what the idea was going to look like. So there's half a sphere with buildings randomly generated on it. And I made a test map with this giant mesh just to see how it would look. And I played around with, less buildings, more buildings. Then I went into the story. What kind of world is this? Who's the main character? What's the goal? And being a cyberpunk story, there's obviously an oppressive government. So the goal of the story is to escape the sphere planet. And the idea I had to start off with is that you play as a smuggler, first person perspective, and you will be smuggling imitation wood, because there's no actual plant life on this planet, but there is like a fake forest in the more affluent area, and you're basically smuggling fake wood. I don't know how I came up with this idea. It's mad. Anyway, a job goes wrong, you get a head injury, you have amnesia, and you don't remember anything. So conveniently you have to learn about the world again, and where you are and who you are. Very original for a game, I know. And this was the kind of basic story for a long time. You would play as this character, and at some point you would be tasked with trying to escape this planet, something that no one to your knowledge has ever been able to do. And at this point I actually created this apartment where you would wake up not remembering anything. I worked on this for probably too long, but your apartment is very inspired by Deckard's from Blade Runner, that kind of futurist, Art Deco, dirty aesthetic. Also a little bit inspired by Adam Jensen's apartment. And for the main character himself, I had this idea of him being a bad person, but it's fine because he has amnesia and you can choose to make him a better person. At that point I also watched a TV show called Electric Dreams, which is an anthology TV series based on Philip K. Dick stories, who also originally wrote the novel that would become Blade Runner. So it kind of went full circle. There was a particular episode called The Hoodmaker, and I was instantly drawn to it because it gave off this Blade Runner kind of aesthetic feeling, and the fact that you could tell it was recorded in London also. Side note, that's another passion of mine, combining Blade Runner with London. But essentially the mood of this episode inspired the map even more. So the character in the TV show, their apartment is based on a real location, and I found this location and I took more inspiration from that. Then I researched it and realised it was a style called brutalism. Then I went down a whole rabbit hole of researching brutalism and realising that I've loved this style before I even knew what it was. Then I started to think about how I can incorporate brutalism more in the game's aesthetic. And yeah, this is the point where you get overwhelmed because you realise you've been looking at buildings and reading about buildings for God knows how long, and there's no real tangible work being done on the game. Another thing I took from that episode was the main character. I really liked the main character. So I decided that I would have a voiced main character. And it made me realise that there aren't a lot of main characters who have Scottish accents. So I thought it would be cool to give him a Scottish accent. And I don't know how that would work in this world, but you know, Star Wars does it all the time, so probably best just not to think about it. So I ended up actually making this short interactable level where your character wakes up, realizes that they don't remember anything. They go outside, they're greeted with this insane looking world, and then they go and talk to the neighbour, who conveniently fills them in on all of the exposition of the world. I always wanted to have a dialogue system in my game, and I ended up making one, but that's an entirely different video. I have lots of other videos showcasing it. But yeah, very hard, probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to learn in Unreal Engine. I'm still scared to open the blueprint because I still don't quite know how it works. I managed to like spaghetti code it together with tape and all kinds of stuff, and it works for now, and I haven't dared change it. This was the first time that I'd hired anyone to do anything creative. I hired 2 voice actors to voice each part. So I would type out dialogue, and I would count the number of words, and I remember being quite specific about the instructions. So at least I think I did one good thing on this project at the very least. And it wasn't even me, it was the voice actors. I then went back and hired one more voice actor to do a very small part where your character is supposed to have gone into work but they don't show up because of their head injury.
Where are you?
Who are you?
And they basically get fired.
Fire!
So I'm going to walk you through what ended up being this level.
Oh, my head.
So my thinking was that someone would hire you as a smuggler to smuggle them out of the planet for reasons. You're such a good smuggler that you got a head injury and don't remember anything, but this person would hire you to help them escape, and this would be the conceit of the game. And at this point I was thinking this game can become something. It's the point where I kind of started to begin to believe it could become a game I can actually finish. Which is ironic because I ended up scrapping pretty much all of that. You don't play as a smuggler, you don't have amnesia, you're not Scottish for some reason, and I decided against even giving a voice to the character. From this point on, I decided you would be a silent protagonist. A few reasons for that is just simplicity. It's hard enough getting one character to talk, yet alone a second character. Also thinking about potential costs, you would have to pay pretty much for twice the amount of lines that you would have. But I feel like that was necessary pragmatism. Anything that could help reduce the scope of this game was good, and I do much prefer the direction I ended up going in, which I think I'll save for part 2 of this video, in this weird reverse devlog series. And the thing is, I'm still working on this game right now as we speak. On and off, of course, you know, have my moments when I'm working on it and I'm not. But I've made some good advancements that I'm looking forward to showing you. But I think that'll be it for this video. If you watched this whole video, then thank you. I would tell you to subscribe, but I don't think it even matters anymore. YouTube knows what you watch, and the algorithm knows when to push you stuff that you've watched previously. So yeah, you know what? Don't subscribe. Don't you dare subscribe. If I see any people subscribing after this video, I will go mental. Anyway, the next video will be out anywhere between a week and a year's time, if that. So yeah, see you in the next video, possibly.